Right off the bat, this knife is pretty different than most of the knives I've covered on this channel. I think it's pretty easy to say that. This knife looks like something straight out of a science fiction show or even a fantasy game, or something a guard in Skyrim would stop you on the road and ask about. And honestly, that's exactly why I want to check this thing out. Today we're taking a look at the Fair Monster Reaver, and this thing is one of the coolest folding knives I've handled in quite a while. Now normally on this channel we look at practical EDC gear, stuff that disappears in the pocket, deep carry pocket clips, clean lines, and budget steals even. But this thing kind of bucks that trend, and not only is it visually so different, but it's also a bit more premium than most knives I tend to cover. But here's the weird part. The more time I spent carrying and using this knife, the more I started to realize this isn't just some fancy mall ninja fantasy prop. There's actually a surprisingly functional knife hiding underneath all the dramatic design choices. So today I want to talk about what this knife gets right, where it gets a little weird, and whether or not a knife shaped like a scimitar actually makes sense for EDC use. So let's get into it. First off, let's talk about the design because there's absolutely no avoiding it here. This thing for sure has some presence. The blade shape immediately grabs your attention with this aggressive clip point / scimitar style profile. It almost feels like somebody took a Persian inspired blade and shrunk it down into a pocketable EDC format. And at a glance, it's really dramatic. It's over the top. It absolutely does not blend in. This is not the knife you want to carry if you want people to ignore your knife. If you pull this out at work to open a package, somebody's probably going to say, dude, what is that? And honestly, I kind of love that here. Because so many knives nowadays feel like slight variations of the exact same thing or feature the exact same drop point blade. After going through as many knives as I have, everything starts to begin to blur together after a little while. And then something like this shows up, and suddenly the knife world feels a little fun again. And Fair Monster clearly understood the assignment here. This knife has the name Reaver, and even that alone sounds like a weapon found in an RPG. But despite this crazy wild look, the knife still feels surprisingly solid in hand. The ergonomics are honestly way better than I expected. It's a really big knife, so it's easy to get a full forefinger grip. There is some jimping on the spine of the blade that your thumb rests on perfectly, and it's an extremely comfortable knife to use and hold. Usually these super stylized knives, comfort can become a sacrifice. Sometimes with funky looking knives like this, you get a really cool looking knife that's actually miserable to actually use. But this handle actually locks in your hand really well. Because of the curve of the handle, it naturally wants to pull through material during cuts. Now let's talk about the blade because it's a big one. This is featuring a 3.82 inch blade of S90V. So rather premium steel here. This is a premium powder super steel known for exceptional wear resistance and edge retention, and I really love to see it here. One thing I really like about this brand is how they are so minimal with their branding. Like, look at the blade here. It's completely void of any markings, and I feel like it makes it just look so much more premium. With this knife, I see this blade a lot, as this actually may come as a shock, but this knife is incredibly smooth to fidget with. Normally, I find frame locks to be a little bit stiff and not the smoothest action-wise. But this one kind of bucks that trend again, as this knife just flies right out with the dual thumb studs, and it absolutely comes slamming home. I really love the action on this knife. It's one of the smoothest frame locks I've ever had. It also came really nice, perfectly centered, and razor sharp. Now another thing I want to mention is the size, because in pictures, this knife actually looked a lot smaller than me than it actually feels in person. In hand, it's pretty large. Fortunately, I like larger knives, and this is just below my limit for a large folder. This has a total length of 8.66 inches, and it's pretty substantial. For example, we can see how it compares to the Kaiser Drop Bear, along with the Vosteed Psyop, and it's definitely bigger than both by about an inch. Again, I normally don't mind larger knives, so it's not a really big deal for me, but just something to be aware of. Now moving on to the handle here, this is featuring titanium throughout. We have titanium handles and even a titanium matching pocket clip that is unfortunately not reversible. The machining and finishing is all really solid. The fit and finish here is all super clean, and the machining on the handles feels really well done. The edges are all finished really nicely, and overall it feels really premium, which, to be honest, it should, as this knife is not cheap. This knife is pricey, no other ways about it. Right now, this knife is just a smidge over $250. That's a heck of a lot for a Chinese-made knife. But let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. We're getting an almost 4-inch blade of a premium steel in S90V with titanium handles and construction. With that in mind, it begins to make a little bit more sense, but still really pricey. If you love the look of this thing and more importantly can't afford it, I don't think you'd be upset with it. It's a heck of a knife and honestly looks cooler than 95% of the other knives out there right now. Now let's talk about carrying this thing. As I mentioned, it's a bigger knife with an almost 4-inch blade and an overall length over 8.5 inches. So due to this size alone, this is not just going to disappear in your pocket. You're going to know it's there. And even though this features a fully titanium construction to keep the weight down, this is still a big piece and weighs honestly not a terrible 4.18 ounces. But there's one thing setting this knife back a little bit in the carry department, and it's actually this titanium pocket clip. Due to this clip, this is not deep carry, and a little bit of the knife will be peeking out above the pocket. I personally don't find this a big deal, and this pocket clip honestly works pretty well. And I really love the shape of this, as it has a little bit of character, and it isn't just a simple straight clip. I mentioned earlier in the video, but I wanted to cover it again here. This knife is not low profile. Now with that said, this knife definitely attracts attention. If you work in a super office-friendly environment or somewhere sensitive to aggressive-looking tools, this may not be the best choice. Due to its size and shape, it looks pretty intense, and some might find it a little bit threatening. Now the obvious question, would I recommend this titanium monster? Absolutely, with an asterisk. If you're looking for maximum practicality, there's definitely simpler knives that'll do everything this does at a fraction of the cost. But if you already own a few knives and you want something that generally stands out in your collection, then this thing absolutely accomplishes that. The knife market is flooded right now with an influx of safe designs. Everyone's chasing the same trends, same shapes, same materials, same aesthetics. Like how many bug out clones have we seen in the past few years? But the Reaver feels like somebody just ignored all that and just designed up something crazy from their imagination. And honestly, I really respect it. Because at the end of the day, knives are tools for sure, but they're also enthusiast objects for crazy people like me and probably you if you're watching this video. People buy watches that are less practical than a Casio because they enjoy them. And people buy sports cars that are less practical than a Civic because they enjoy them too. And this knife kind of falls into that same category. It's not trying to be invisible, it's not trying to be understated, it really wants attention and it absolutely gets it. So overall, the Fair Monster Reaver really ended up surprising me. It's an interesting design that actually works much better than I expected. If you guys want to check this knife out for yourself, I'll make sure to leave a link down to this in the description below. But I want to hear from you guys. Would you actually carry something like this? Either way, I think Fair Monster deserves some credit for making something that's actually memorable. Because in a world full of identical knives, this thing definitely isn't that. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.